in the future, we are not going to have firms that only do architecture and interior design.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be a multidisciplinary firm. You have to venture into other fields as well.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Archeon podcast. That was a small snippet from today's episode with our guest, Dev Tyagi from the Design Collective. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode. Apologies for the long delay in publishing an episode. We're going to be consistent from here on out and start publishing episodes every now and then, hopefully every week and one day every day. So for today, we have with us Dev Tyagi from the Design Collective. He's the founder of the Design Collective, which is an independent digital publication platform in the architectural realm. They give a voice to all eminent architects as well as emerging architects from India and around the world. They have over 24,000 plus followers on Instagram, and they have a very cool website called the designcollective.co.in. They curate all their content really well, and I was blown away by the design and the effort they put into publishing every single article, blog post, social media, whatever it is in the Design Collective. So in this episode, you'll get to listen to Dev's journey and how he got started, how he founded the Design Collective, the various challenges they faced in the beginning, what plans they have for the future, and we also touch in depth about architectural journalism. So this episode gives you an idea about architectural journalism and how it plays a big role in the digital media of architecture. So there's a lot of useful information. We have podcast show notes, which would be right there below this video, and also on our website. Do check out our website as well, which is archean.com. And for this episode, it's archean.com/46. So I hope you guys like this episode, gain some valuable gyan from this episode, and hopefully it would inspire you to get into writing, journalism, and more. So this is the journey of the Design Collective with Dev Tyagi. Let's go.
Actually, I was one of those students who was pushed into the crowd of wanting to do engineering, and initially, because apparently that was the go-to job. If you do engineering, when I was small, we were told that if you do engineering, you're gonna have a decent life, a good package, and everything basically that you want. So everybody was joining all sorts of coaching classes from here and there,
Right, right.
and that's what I also did. So in my hometown in Indore, I've joined almost every other coaching class and left it because the moment I used to join it, I never used to like it, and I always
Okay.
used to leave it. That's when I realized that I need to do something that is creative, that
Hmm.
makes me use my hands, makes me move around, not just sitting in front of a book and mugging up things. So
Hmm.
that's when I came around architecture, and I
Hmm.
was always good at sketching, good at doing creative things at home. So initially, I would admit that I never really understood what architecture was.
Right.
For me, it was just that okay, you're good at sketching, so and you don't want to read books and stuff.
Hmm.
You want to do something practical, so might as well get into architecture, and that's how my choice for architecture actually happened.
Awesome. And how was your time at architecture school? You studied in Indore, right? Which is your
Yes,
hometown
my
as well.
no, I studied in Nagpur actually,
Okay, Nagpur, right.
and in Priyadarshini Institute.
Hmm.
My initial years in architecture school were very tough because we had to give one of those exams because we are from different state and we were applying in Maharashtra.
Right, right.
So there was a centralized examination that we had to give. So all the students who used to come up for the examination, they already had engineering, drawing, and technical subjects in the 11th and 12th.
Hmm.
Whereas for me, I had absolutely no clue. So I
Hmm.
remember when I went to first day to college when I went, I was just staring around looking at all the students. There was a task given to us. I think it was something about drawing letters and stuff using
Right,
your drafting equipments.
right, right.
And the T scale and sketch square just stood in front of me, and I didn't know what to do.
Hmm.
And I saw everybody around me who were, well versed with knowing what to do with it. So my initial years were like that. I had no guidance whatsoever, and I never used to talk to people so much. I was used to stay to myself, so that also didn't really help. But then later, when I worked and I worked for multiple firms, that's when I realized, okay, what happens in school and what happens in uh, offices or happens in projects are two different things altogether.
Yeah.
So that's when the passion really developed, and I
Mm.
got a niche towards architecture. And then when I came back and I started pursuing my studies again, I started to excel.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, getting to architecture school is a very overwhelming experience, right? Like, especially the first few
Yeah,
months. Everything is so different
because
compared to
it's a
your.
culture. It's
Yeah,
actually a culture that you're not aware about.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not like anything else that you've seen before.
yeah, absolutely. All right. And then after architecture, you did work in certain practices, right? So give us a brief
Right.
about your experience as an architect in the field.
So initially, I interned for Smith and Habib Khan Associates in Nagpur.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, Habib sir, who is now the president for Council of Architecture,
Mm-hmm.
I was under him. And for
Nice.
the first, I think, 6 months, he never let me enter the studio.
Right,
He made me an ordinary site supervisor and gave me a couple of sites. He had all these bank projects at that time.
right.
All the big banks, HDFC, IDFC, he had all of them.
Nice.
So we had to go to all these small cities in Maharashtra, outside Maharashtra, and check on the sites over there, check on how the banks are being made, whether the branches are being made, how the ATM machines are being installed, and stuff like that.
The
So
locker vault and all
he
that.
gave me all, right. So he gave me all the sites to manage. So it
Mm.
was a completely thankless job, completely non-glamorous job, in which suddenly a call would come. You'll have to take a bus from here and there. You'll have
Mm-hmm.
to take whatever commute was available to go to whatever site in whatever locality you haven't even heard of,
Mm-hmm.
and go and see what's happening over there and source material from whatever vendors are available in that particular area. If not, then go to other cities just to source material from there and then
Mm-hmm.
come there.
Nice.
So initially, my groundwork was, because at that time I didn't understand. That time I
Mm.
thought, okay, क्या करना पड़ रहा है यहाँ से? He is asking me to run
Wait.
around from one place to another.
Mm.
So I didn't understand it then. But then later I realized that when you do that, when you get to know what happens on ground level, only
Mm.
then you should be eligible enough to sit in the studio, because the studio
Yeah.
work is a clean job. You sit in front of the computer and you make your designs, but then how it gets implemented on site, how it gets executed, that is a different ballgame altogether.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Like site work is very missing in most architecture schools, and we only learn it after we graduate, right?
Uh, Actually, there's a reason for that, because I don't believe a lot of people talk about giving a lot of exposure to architecture students when it
Mm.
comes to teaching architecture in architecture school. But then um, architecture in itself is such a vast field. There's only
Mm.
so much you can put into 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, it'll be a 10-year course. Otherwise, it's a practicing field. It's an independent field. You're never going to stop learning. So you can only put so much in 5 years, which is just the basic language of architecture, and the rest is pretty much up to you. So you have to do your groundwork yourself. You have to go to sites. Sites are happening everywhere, and you can just walk into any site, and you'll always get to learn.
So software came later for you. Like you did have a good
Yes,
grounding in site
software
work.
came
Yeah.
later to me.
Okay.
Yes, definitely, and it has always been the case of, actually, because I don't belong to an architecture family. There's no one in my family who is an architect, so there was nobody to advise. I had nothing to lose basically. I
Mm.
used to, I remember joining a firm without knowing a few softwares. And
Mm.
then when I joined, I learned it while I was over there, just
Yeah.
because I was able to pick it up fast. But then software is something you'll always learn.
Mm.
It's not difficult. And today you can just open up YouTube, there'll be a step-by-step tutorial. You
Yeah.
keep following it and you learn. And then the more you practice, the more you're going to learn about it.
Exactly.
So software definitely came later for me. Initially, it was all about learning what happens on site.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in a way that architecture, the course, right, helps us be more creative, of course, but ideation in terms of coming up with new concepts, we have sort of upper hand compared to the engineers and all the rest of the
Right.
guys. All right, so talking about, yeah, go ahead if you
No, I
have
was
something to say
talking about
about.
the conceptualization part. It's basically a skill.
Mm,
So that can not be taught. That's in you, and it needs to be nurtured.
mm,
Everything else, when it comes to architecture, when it comes to making drawings, when it comes to site work, everything else can be taught.
mm,
You keep doing the same thing 5 times, the sixth time you're going to be able to do it. But designing skill, understanding functionality, understanding technicality, all of those things cannot be taught. That is a skill that needs to be nurtured with years.
Exactly. All right, great. So, how did you come up with this magazine and this creative knowledge base called the Design Collective? What was the idea behind Design Collective, and when did you get started with it?
Okay, so when I was working, I decided that okay, I want to set up my own firm and I want to come back to my hometown and start things over here.
Hmm.
So I came here, I set up my place and everything. I have a small studio over here. I did my first project. When I finished it, I wanted to publish it.
Hmm.
So I had no clue about how publishing works, how magazines work,
Hmm.
how you're supposed to send it to them. So I approached a few magazines, and I remember one magazine, without even seeing my project, sent me an estimate of 75,000 per paragraph. That
Oh wow,
they,
okay.
right, and
This was
they
in
had
India
different
itself.
packages. Right, they had different packages. That okay, one paragraph we'll put for 75,000.
Right.
If you want an entire page, we'll put for 2 lakhs. So stuff like that.
Okay.
So I thought that okay, this is really unfair because I can understand. I'm not against people charging when it comes to magazines because you have a staff, you need to pay their salaries, so that's fine. But charging something exorbitantly high, which is
Hmm.
way out of proportion, doesn't make sense. So that's when I realized that okay, um, I need to research more about this. There must be some magazine that will be
Hmm.
ready to publish my work without charging for it. So I researched. Almost every magazine that I found
Hmm.
was not really interested in publishing my work
Hmm.
because they were charging for it. So that's when I decided, okay, there is a need for a portal that allows people like me, upcoming young architects,
Hmm.
who want to publish their work, who are doing good work, and who just need a platform, a curated platform, to showcase their works, basically. So that's when I thought that I should probably come up with something like that. But
Hmm.
then it took me at least 6 months, 8 months to research in depth about everything.
Hmm.
Journalism was new to me, criticism was new to me. Big chunk of um, um, business models, administration, which at the end of the day, architecture is a business, right?
Hmm.
That is never taught in architecture school. I
Yeah.
thought that okay, when you're done with architecture school, you can just start practicing. It's just not that easy. You can't just start practicing right
Hmm.
after done with architecture
Of course.
unless you've got your parents who are already in that field.
Hmm.
So you've got a lot of avenues that are open to you. But
Hmm.
then if you don't have that kind of a luxury and you're starting by yourself, you can't just start practicing. So that's when I came up with the idea of creating a portal like this where anybody can publish content related to architecture, design, or art.
Awesome. So in those 6, 8 months, you figured out how to start a website, how to get in touch with people, how to
Yeah,
network, and all that, right?
that is also interesting because I had no knowledge about. I actually first researched that okay, let's get somebody to make the website for us.
Hmm.
But then again, when you're starting up, we didn't have that kind of a budget because hiring somebody becomes a costly affair.
Hmm.
And then I again use the power of internet. There are lots of easy, like for example, we use Wix for our
Hmm.
website.
Nice.
Apart from that, also there are very good apps that are available, which are easily customizable and editable. So um, I learned that in the span of 6 to 8 months. Also, I
Hmm.
researched about journalism, what my magazine would want to do, what areas would want to touch, how we'll be different, because it's a very competitive area. Social media in general is very competitive.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be different. We wanted to stand out. We wanted to be our, when it comes to say our name, we wanted our name to be easily rememberable. We wanted it to be flexible. We wanted our
Hmm.
logo to be flexible. Our magazine in itself is flexible. I can't tell you right now what next edition I'm going to be launching.
Right. Right.
It'll depend on whatever content we've got. Then we'll circulate a concept, and so everything that we're doing is basically a surprise. We don't know what we're going to come up with next. So I like that flexibility.
Awesome. And how did you come up with the name, the Design Collective? What is the idea behind the
So
name?
I wanted the name basically to represent initially when I was starting out, I just had my studio in mind.
Hmm.
I just wanted to practice architecture and interior design.
Hmm.
But then I always had an interest towards other fields. So I wanted my name for the company to be representative of that. I didn't want to keep on changing it. I wanted it to be flexible. So that's when the idea of a collective came, that when it comes to a collective, uh, it can pretty much be anything. You can
Nice.
branch into furniture design tomorrow. You can branch into a magazine tomorrow. You can branch into product design tomorrow. You can do whatever you want, but your brand name remains the same. Everything falls under one umbrella. Same goes with our logo. When we were designing logo, I spent around 3 months just trying to understand how the logo will be,
Hmm.
and I wanted it to be flexible so that it's easily, uh, we can easily put it on a piece of paper,
Hmm.
on anywhere on social media. So everything when it comes to my magazine is about flexibility. It should be easily customizable without having to make too much of an effort.
And also building a brand, right? Like how we have the Arc
Yeah.
Daily.
Right, we have again when it comes to people like Arc Daily, Arc Digest, those are global powerhouses.
Hmm.
So I have never thought of competing with them because a magazine that's 100 years old, 200 years old, you can never really compete with those,
Hmm.
right?
No, I
They
don't think
have
they're 100
far
years old, but yeah, they do have a large reach
right.
compared
I
to,
mean, it's an understatement the kind of reach that they have. They've
yeah,
got like AD, for example, it's got AD Russia, AD Spain, AD this,
yeah.
AD that. So it's huge. So we can never compete with that. But what we
Hmm.
can do is we can be different. So that's when the idea of an edition-based online publication came to me. We never wanted to go into print. I can't see us going into print in the future.
Okay.
Maybe it could be a special edition, but I don't think on a regular basis we'll ever go into print. So what we do basically is that we compile an edition and then we
Hmm.
put it up online. So and the preview for whatever edition is being compiled right now is available on social media. So what happens is the cycle keeps repeating itself basically. So when it comes to branding, when it comes to marketing, we never really had to do it because it
Hmm.
automatically happened for us.
Right. So how do you publish? No, before I get to the publish, could you tell us briefly about the initial struggle and when do you feel that you started reaching out and the design collective had started getting that reputation that it needed?
So when it comes to struggle, I would say that we are always struggling. When it comes to in this field, the struggle never stops. It
Yeah,
just keeps on
absolutely.
presenting itself in different forms, right? So and I would always want to think that we are in our initial years because then you're hungry and you want to constantly compete, which is a good thing. So I don't know whether it comes to building a reputation because from where I want the magazine to go, there's a long time for that.
Hmm.
So right now we've just started. I remember, but whenever some small accomplishment we get, we always celebrate it. Like when we got 100 followers on Instagram, I was very happy about it. I
Nice.
had no one to tell at that
Hmm.
time that I got 100 followers on Instagram. It doesn't even mean anything in today's world, but then I was happy about that. So, and I had nothing to lose basically. When I came up with the idea of the magazine, I thought that okay, let's put this. I was like that okay, even if it doesn't work, who cares? Nobody will come to know. It's not that
Hmm.
people know me. So even if I come up with the magazine, and if for some reason it doesn't work, I'll just shut it down, and then great. Nobody's going to come to know that I came up with this idea. But then we were, when it comes to the fraternity, we were welcome with open arms. I remember we had contacted Sarah Sham of Fisaji's atelier from Bombay
Right.
and Nishita Kamdar. So they never asked us where are we from or what's our demographic, how many readers we have, etc. We asked them for a project and they just gave it to us. They were happy to publish on a platform that just has 50 followers. So
And unlike the other publishers, you're doing it for free, and you weren't really charging the initial months, right?
no, we were not. We were doing it for free. Uh, Currently, we do charge, but then that publication fee is a very nominal fee, and it is only because now we have a staff, now we have people who are working with us. So somebody has to pay the bills. So it's only for that. We don't indulge in any kind of a promotion when it comes to the projects that we feature. And when it comes to sensitive topics, like for example, recently we work with Petal, that is the hammering of brass utensils, an
Hmm.
initiative that wants to conserve that particular craft. So when it comes to people like those, we don't charge them. We just want the story to be known.
Hmm.
And uh, I still haven't come to terms with the idea of running advertisements on our magazine. I just don't find advertisements cool. I don't want them to pop up when I open my magazine. So what we do is, when it comes to the magazine, whatever people want to publish, when it passes the screening process, we our team works with them exclusively, tries to
Hmm.
understand what the philosophy is about, try to understand what they are aiming to do, and we try and give each of our publications equal importance so that they portray it in the light they want.
All right. And how are you reaching out to more architects and architecture students? Like, what are the different mediums that you guys use?
Okay, so initially we just used to um, reach out to people through their emails
Hmm.
uh, mentioned on the website. uh, when it comes to artists, we used to find them on Instagram. We always used to look for new and upcoming people who haven't been published as yet, who people don't know about. Because when you come across art that you've never seen before, you always get excited. So that's how our followers started to grow
Hmm.
initially, because the people that we were publishing, people did not know about it before. And when it comes to circulating, when it comes to people publishing with us. Right now, we're in a stage where we don't need to contact people. People know that there's a magazine and they contact us. But initially, we used to write down emails to people, send them messages on Instagram, uh, asking them to have a look at our website, asking them to have a look at our magazine and what we are trying to do. And if they like it, if they like the content, if they think that, okay, they have a project in mind that will probably go well with what we're trying to do, then they send it to us.
All right, great. I've been running the Archean podcast for like more than almost 2 years now. But the finances is still a problem, right? So,
Right.
how have you managed with the finances? Because I'm sure that magazine alone cannot generate all the revenue you need to run a firm or run the magazine, right?
Right. So when it comes to the finances, like mostly uh, people who are strictly online, they run ads. Uh, Without that, it becomes very difficult to sustain yourself. Apart from that, there are always sponsors. But then
Hmm.
for sponsors, you need followers, you need people,
Hmm.
you need, because that's how you're going to pitch to your sponsors. You're going to show them your demographics. You're going to make them believe that using them is going to be of any advantage to them. So they want to know that, okay, uh, how many people do you have that read, like in our magazine, what we called is the relay basically is how many unique visitors that you get per week. Like
Hmm.
Architecture Digest was around 5 million, 5 lakh I think per month.
Right, right.
So that's what they want to know basically. Only then sponsors are going to come on board. So when we started out, advertising and sponsors were out of question for us because we didn't have followers. So we used to, when initially for at least I think couple of months, 3 4 months, we never used to charge. All our publication was for free. Now we have a few packages uh, that we charge as a processing fee for people who publish with us. If we're doing special features, if we are creating content for people specifically, like we did for people, then again we charge a fee for that. Apart from that, if we are just posting your projects on a regular basis, then we don't charge. So again, it's not something that generates a lot of revenue. Apart from that, our revenue gets generated by sponsors. Now that
Hmm.
we have those followers, we're able to get them on board. So when we conduct interviews, when we conduct, say, new features, such as we've just recently started conducting live features. So our sponsors give us a fee for that, and in return, we use the logo during those sessions and promote them in whatever way we can. So right now we are slowly shifting our financing towards that. But then up till now, it's not even been a year. We'll complete a year in May end. So up till now, our finances were being managed through publications when we charged a fee for it. And
Nice.
it's interesting that you asked this because when it comes to charging a fee for publications, most of the big house architecture firms and design firms are against it. They're
Hmm.
against it because they feel it becomes a promotion and they are
Hmm.
against promoting their work, against advertising. But what we do is we don't promote your work in any way. What we do is we present your work in a way that it is understand. That's the whole idea of architecture journalism. That understanding the context of design, understanding its functionality for the common man.
Hmm.
So that is what we try and do. We do not try and advertise. That's why even when we get images with watermarks, um, when you talk about firms that write to us, 80% of firms that still write to us in third person.
Hmm.
They'll add emotional lines in the text
Hmm.
that it was something like praising their own self while and a little bit about their firm also. So we never
Yeah.
publish that. We either ask them to edit or we edit them ourselves because we try and make sure that whatever we're posting doesn't come across as advertising, doesn't come across as promotion.
All right. And you must be having a set of standards or prerequisites before they send it to you.
Right.
Or what do you see in any project or something which you feel is worthy of coming into the design collective?
We have a screening process in
Hmm.
place. This screening process is on the basis of project's exclusivity, whether it has been published by other media outlets or not, because
Hmm.
a lot of firms will want their projects to be published by maximum number of media outlets, which is the culture over here, but that is not how it should be. When you've got a project, you should look for the magazine that can do the best justice to your project and portray it in the best possible way instead of sending it to 10 different media outlets because then it just becomes the same thing repeating itself.
Yeah.
And especially firms who follow media outlets, mm, follow all the media outlets that are available to us, they keep seeing the same content again and again. So what we try and do is that whenever we get um, a project, we try and check its exclusivity. We've got a submission guideline that is mentioned on our website, which is a general guideline for people who have no clue about how to write, how to publish, what to do, who to send. So it guides you as to what to do and what not to do. And I think the first or second line mentioned in the guideline is that if you have an exclusive project, then make sure you mention it in the subject line because we have a lineup. So we'll move it up the lineup before other media outlets publish it. We want to be the first to publish it.
Right.
And apart from that, we judge it on the basis of the quality of work, the quality of design, the quality of pictures. You might have really good design, might have a really good project, but then it wouldn't be documented that well, so we won't be able to publish it. So a project needs to be documented well. It needs to be of a certain design level. And what I consider the most important is that you need to be able to write about it. If you're not going to be able to write about it, if you're not, because what happens is that a lot of firms send us their write-ups. They'll forget to mention the photographer. They'll forget to mention any design credits.
Hmm.
They won't write it in third person. They'll add promotional lines. The English in general won't be good enough. So, and what they feel this is the magazine's job, but this is not really the magazine's job.
Hmm.
Unless we're doing an exclusive feature, we get right now we get around 100 to 150 emails in a week,
Hmm.
and we respond to all of them. And we've got so many projects to screen. If we started writing about each and every one of them in detail, it's not going to be feasible. So you have to write, you have to explain. And secondly, it's your client, it's your project. You know what happened, you know what you set out to do, you know what the objectives were. So whatever concept note that needs to be written can be written by you better than us. So of course we edit it, we portray it in a manner that's easily understandable for everybody, for our readers, for our viewers. But then most importantly, people who send us write-ups, we when people don't send us write-ups, we don't publish it. So all these criteria, whether it's about having good pictures, whether it's about being exclusive, whether it's about having a good write-up, whether it's about mentioning proper credits, mentioning all the people that were involved, sending us all your Instagram credits, Facebook credits, because right now we are also on Twitter. So making sure that's, because we can't go around searching for each and every
Hmm.
person. You'll have the same person with 10 different profiles on different
Right.
media platforms. So it's very difficult to search. So it's better that you give us that information. So it's easy for us to tag all of them. And we like tagging all of them. Because if you work with the project, you want that your name also appears there. And unless and until you tag somebody, the person doesn't come to know that this project that you worked on has been
Hmm.
published. So we follow this sort of a screening process whenever a new project comes to us.
All right. And but you do have a team, right? Like a team of copywriters or graphic designers who get the work done. And are these
Right.
guys architects or in particularly just graphic
We
designers?
have people on a part-time basis.
Hmm.
We have a couple of copywriters, couple of writers, couple of photographers that we hire on a part-time basis who come and go type. Because no matter how much we try, when it comes to our magazine, there's no particular system that we follow.
Hmm.
There's no one way in which, that's how we're different. When it comes to other magazines, they have a particular standard, they have a particular way of presenting all their projects, and everything falls under that category.
Yeah.
But when it comes to us, we try and publish each project in a different way. Whenever edition comes up, we try and make sure each edition is different than the previous one. Like right now, we have the yellow edition, which is inspired from the pandemic and the
Hmm.
situation that we are in right now. So, and in the future, what edition we're going to come up is going to be different again. So, depending on what our need is right now and what we're aiming to do, we hire people on basis of that.
All right. And talking about the pandemic, how has the COVID situation affected your website and the design collective in general?
Actually, I mean, I don't know whether I should share this or not, but it's been an advantage to us because everybody is at home.
Hmm.
Everybody is using social media all the time. So they're constantly available. We are getting more mails than we ever used to because
Hmm.
everybody wants to now focus on this, focus on, especially firms. They want that, okay, our projects are not going on. So what we can do is make sure other projects get published. Otherwise,
Right, right.
the time frame that is required, the time frame that it takes for a person to respond to us was quite large. But now, since everybody is at home, they're able to respond to us faster. So, and when it comes to like almost everybody on Instagram is doing live sessions right now, um, trying to come up with ways and means
Yeah.
to keep people occupied and at the same time be productive at home. So when it comes to, because we always function digitally, we always function virtually, so it doesn't really have a disadvantage for us.
All right. And could you briefly tell us about the analytics and how many visits you get or how many followers that
So
you have?
right now, we get around 700 to 800 unique visits per week,
Okay.
and apart from that, we have a readership of around, in totality, combining all of our social media outlets, of around 35,000.
Nice.
Um, so yeah.
All right. And tell us a brief about, how generally you started the website, but then your eventual transition will be social media. So how has social
No,
media
it was
helped?
the opposite. We started through
Okay.
Instagram,
Right, right.
and Instagram still remains our main forefront because it
Hmm.
just falls in line with everything that we want to do,
Right.
and the app in general allows us to do all of that. So we started with an Instagram page, and when we started getting the response, that's what I wanted to do first. That we'll test it on Instagram and see if it works. Then we'll make a website,
Hmm.
and if that works, then we'll expand. So
Hmm.
it was, uh, I don't know whether it was a conscious effort or not, but it happened step by step. So, like recently, we launched our Twitter handle. So later, we can launch our YouTube handle also. So it was first social media, and then coming up with a website, basically.
And this was early 2019, right?
Yeah.
All right. And what are your plans for Design Collective? I feel like this year might be a bit of a lag because of the pandemic, but otherwise, what would be your future plans and goals for the
Uh,
brand?
Future plans. See, the best thing about the magazine is that it's very flexible, and what I would want for it is to increase the threshold of curating projects. Right now, with every edition, we've actually increased the threshold. Initially, so that we get more viewers, new followers. When we started out, we used to publish almost every project that came to us because the number of projects that used to come to us were quite limited. So we had to go ahead with them. But now we're in a stage where we can curate projects, we can screen them even better. So with every passing edition, what I'd like that we increase that threshold, we become even more curated, even more selective. We focus on more sensitive topics. We talk about topics that are more uh, say topics like sustainability, topics like contextuality, young architecture firms who are not getting a place to publish their work, we focus on them.
Hmm.
Artists again, when people ask us that what kind of project we publish, what kind of content we publish, a lot of people message us on Instagram asking that how do we get published on your uh, Instagram outlet. We always tell them that we publish anything when it comes to architecture, design, and art. We started with very few features. We only used to focus on architecture and design, but then slowly we've now started to expand, and we focus on any story that is interesting, that we feel that our readers will love to read about, love to view, love to understand. We do a story as long as it's related to a creative field.
All right. And how are you going to help the architectural education system in India? As in, because I'm asking, the reason I'm asking you this is because, I felt personally that architectural education was not as great as I wish it could have been. So you're focused more on the projects, but how do you, bring in that part of the uh, scenario as well?
See, when it, I am one of those who doesn't think that architecture education in India needs major changes. I
Hmm.
do believe it needs changes, but I don't think it needs major changes because you cannot sum everything up to 5 years.
Hmm.
And then if you do that, people are going to be more dependent on that, and they're not going to be more independent. Secondly, when it comes to improving the architecture education, like for example, when it comes to a magazine, what we try and do with a magazine is we try and explore the field of architecture journalism, which is something that is not taught in
Hmm.
colleges. Not all colleges. Some people have it as an elective, some people don't. But then most of, architecture colleges don't have architecture journalism. Then the business side of things that I was talking about, when it comes to what business model you should set up, contracts, when it comes to administration, all these things are again not taught in college. When it comes to making something as basic as a company profile, what is a company profile, what all things should include, what all things should not include, so all these things are not taught in college. So, and these are essentials, these should be a part. So I feel that all these things should be included because architecture education right now is limited to the language of architecture, teaching you the A, B,
Hmm.
and C. But then it should also equip students to be better off in terms of the education when it comes to practicing, when it comes to going to the field. Because the only way right now you can learn all these things is by your experiences. Some person might get it, people won't get it. So I was lucky enough to work for architecture firms which had a whole PR team committed towards journalism, committed
Hmm.
towards contacting magazines. So I could talk to them, I could understand that how this works, what do you guys write, what do you send, how do you contact them, what do they want. So that's how I came to know. But then small offices don't have that luxury. So people who are working
Hmm.
there, they're never going to come to know about these things. So I feel that the business side of things should be taught in architecture education.
Awesome. And yeah, talking about architectural journalism, journalism has become more dynamic now, right? It's not just
Right.
fluidic writing or that great
Right.
use of language. It's
Mhm.
become more visual, and it's there's so much more to it, right? So could you briefly tell us about architectural journalism in the 21st century?
So, see, when it comes to architecture journalism, it's very interesting because, um, let's say, let's talk about emotion, for example. How do you express emotion? You express emotion through action, you express emotion through language. So, when it comes to expressing architecture, how do you express architecture? You have to, there needs to be a way to communicate architecture. So, and there needs to be a professional way to communicate architecture. So, when it comes to architecture journalism, it is the voice of architecture. it takes architecture. It is the only way to take architecture to the masses. Without journalism, you really can't do anything about that. Secondly, architecture journalism goes hand in hand with architecture criticism.
Mm.
What students don't realize is that part of architecture school is all about criticizing your own designs and then presenting it to a jury, and then the jury will criticize it. So
Yeah.
when you are standing in front of a jury, when you're explaining your design, you are playing the role of a journalist. You are basically trying to tell them that what the brief was, how you tackled it, and what your design is, and then the critic will analyze it, and then tell you what your mistakes are, tell you what good points are, and then from that you can improve it even further. So this applies to modern day architecture, contemporary architecture. In order for us to um, progress in the field of architecture, uh, architecture criticism needs to be the backbone. Right now, there are very few ways in which we can validate architecture,
Mm.
because architecture criticism and journalism is not recognized by any national body as a field as yet.
Mm.
There are very few awards. There are very few journalists in India who get any sort of recognition. So what I feel should happen is that our national body, which is the Council of Architecture, should be recognizing architecture journalism, should be recognizing architecture journalists and the role they play. Uh, we have so many design magazines in India right now. All of them are doing wonderful work. So our national body should be recognizing it, should be recognizing the importance of them and how they are making things better when it comes to our field. So what, in my opinion, architecture criticism validates architecture,
Mm.
and architecture journalism is the voice of architecture. So basically, an architecture journalist, for people who want to pursue a career in architecture journalism,
Mm.
their role is basically of a messenger. What they will do is that they will um, get the criticism from somewhere and then take it and transfer it to somebody else and present it to the common man, basically. So yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of criticism, do you feel that it's not? I mean, we're not criticizing projects as much as we have to, right? It's more about the praising of the projects or how they.
We're
Uh,
not criticizing projects professionally. We are criticizing them because
mm.
if we are not doing it, our projects are not improving.
Mm.
Uh, if when you are sitting in a team and you're discussing how you can best achieve the client's goals, you are
Mm.
criticizing. When you have produced a design and then you're evaluating whether this design is feasible or not, then again you're criticizing. So you're doing it.
Mm.
You're just not doing it professionally. And criticizing does not really mean just within yourself. When you're done with a project, uh, 80% of the firms, 80% of the projects that we get today still don't know how to write, still don't know
Mm.
how to write about their projects.
Right.
They don't know what should go and what shouldn't go in.
Mm.
So this is because a large part of it was not taught in their education, was not taught about, they were not taught about basically what architectural criticism is in general. That is why nowadays not many students who come out from architecture colleges want to pursue this as a career, because it's a thankless career. You
Mm.
don't get a lot of revenue from it unless you join some big magazine. So
Yeah.
basically, it's a thankless field.
All right. And yeah, and criticism, it doesn't have to restrict it to architecture, right? It can be about cities. It can be about how the government is.
Right.
Yeah. So that also can be a
Right.
part of it.
Criticism can be related to anything. We, for example, we publish anything when it comes to architecture, design, and art.
Mm.
So an artist also has to criticize his work. He has to produce a write-up and explain the technical aspects of it, the functional aspects of it to the common man, what he set
Mm.
out to achieve, what this artwork is trying to tell them. Because in order to express what he wanted to do, he has to put pen and paper to it.
Yeah. And now we have a lot of architectural publications, right? Like Rethinking the Future
Right.
Architecture Chat, and the big ones, of course, like ArcDaily, Daisy. So do you feel the new ones which are coming up or the ones which are existing, it's sort of becoming more of a competition for you, or is it more of a positive, uh, you know,
So it depends on what you're trying to do. I feel there's a lot of scope when it comes for new magazines to come up, as long as you're being different. Like when you see see our Instagram feed, we follow a sort of a free flowing sort of a pattern on Instagram, where a lot of people ask us that why do you keep posting all these blank posts? So we tell them that that's how we want our Instagram to look. We want it to be artistic. We want it to look good, and we want that each and every project gets equal importance. So that's how our Instagram looks different from any other magazine. When it comes to following a monthly edition, that every few months we compile an edition and then we put it up online. We are not like other magazines that whenever a project comes to them, they directly write a blog and put it up online. It's available for you to share. So when you send a project to us, we'll first put it as a preview on social media, and then in the coming months, whenever edition comes out, then the entire blog will be available online. So as long as you're different, people are going to. And again, it's very important that I feel that you're selective and you curate content, because there are a lot of magazines that publish everything. There are a lot of magazines that publish anything when it comes to architecture, interior design, art for that matter. But we don't do that. We follow a screening process and try and strict ourselves to content, especially the kind of content that is new, that is upcoming, that people haven't heard about, and that talks about sensitive issues. We want to bring that to the people. So as long as you're different, as long as you're trying to carve a niche out for yourself, you are always going to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that there should be more magazines, but they should be more focused on the niche, like maybe on architecture schools
Right.
or
There
something
should be
along those
selective
lines.
magazines.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. All right. Great. I think we had a great session. Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, about Instagram and that blank post. When
Right.
when you have when you post like three, four, and then you post one, then it goes a bit haywire, right? So how do you manage that, or is it like you have a set schedule
So
for Instagram
what
posts?
we wanted to do basically, see, because we curate content, we don't we need time before we post our next feature. So before doing that, we need time. So Instagram and the social media game, forget architecture, forget design. In order to get followers, we have to keep posting regularly, and you have to keep posting different content regularly. Right. So what we wanted to do is that we wanted to make it seem that we are posting regularly, but then we also wanted the time to curate and find something else to post basically. So, and people keep sending us information. Right now, of course, we get a lot of projects, a lot of our mailbox is always full. But then initially, when we started out, literally had to search. So that search time could be 10 days, could be 15 days, could be 20 days. So we wanted to come up with a pattern that looks good on Instagram. And when we post something, we create multiple posts. So it seems as if that we're posting on a regular basis, so that more people want to join us. Because
Right.
believe it
Right.
or not, when it comes to Instagram, Facebook, the only way you can get more followers is by being different
Consistency.
and by posting on a regular basis,
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
people want to see your content. Right?
Yeah.
If you're not posting on a regular basis, then that time that you take, nothing is happening. There are no followers, and then a lot of people will want to unfollow you also, because they'll feel that okay, this person is not posting anymore. Let's unfollow them.
And have you plans to start Instagram Live as well? Like a lot of people doing
Yes,
that now,
we've
right?
already started Instagram Live, and again,
Okay.
we want our Instagram Live to be different. We want
Mm.
it to promote artists. We want to get more artists who make interesting artwork and do it live so that people can see, ask questions. We want to get young architecture firms who are practicing in areas related to sustainable architecture, mud building, bamboo, and things that basically you don't really get to learn in architecture college.
Mm.
So our Instagram live sessions are aiming to provide that sort of an exposure to people, to our viewers, and ask them questions, and talk about their work, talk about their life, talk about how they set up their firm, what do's and don'ts to keep in mind while you're starting practice. Like for example, our next session is with a firm in Bangalore, who is a young firm practicing sustainable architecture and design. So we want it to be a session in which people who have no clue about this understand that how can you find out more about sustainable architecture, how can you find out more about setting up a firm like that, and how do you sell it to your clients. Another
Hmm.
important thing that when you get clients who have no clue about sustainable architecture and why is it important, how do you sell it to them? So we want our sessions to be like that. We want it to be different, and we most importantly want it to be from people who you haven't seen before, firms who are young, and firms who are not to say established as such in terms of our fraternity, where everybody knows you, everybody knows the kind of work you do. So we want to promote them.
Yeah, awesome. I think those tips would apply for me as well as a podcaster.
Right. Right.
All right,
But
thanks,
even you're
Dave.
doing the same thing. You are playing the role of an architecture journalist.
Yeah.
A key part about architecture journalism that it has to adapt with time. Right now, a large part of it is on social media. Initially, it was limited to print.
Hmm.
So in the future, we'll see another change. So even you, for example, are an architecture journalist.
Yeah, and even when you talk about journalism again, it's transitioning from this medium of writing to audio, then video,
Right.
and I don't know, in the future it must be even virtual reality where sit and talk with
Right.
the architect in person from your house.
Right. You never know, definitely.
Yeah. All right, and let's wrap it up. So, what advice would you give, to young architects or still figuring out what they want to do and just starting off?
So my advice would be to um, always be hungry, always help themselves. What people like, I teach in design school, I teach in architecture school.
Hmm.
So what students feel that everything is going to be taught to them, which is not possible in a practicing field. You have to be somebody who keeps inspiring themselves and inspiring themselves to learn, to keep on finding out what's happening in your field in today's world, and to not only find but to understand. Um, at the same time, what I would recommend to students who want to start their own practice is that,
Hmm.
of course, people say that you should always work before you start your own practice. You should always get some experience under your belt. But what I also recommend is find uh, some speciality for yourself, because nowadays everything's getting so competitive. uh, in the future, we are not going to have firms that only do architecture and interior design.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be a multidisciplinary firm. You have to venture into other fields as well. Nowadays, all the modern firms are venturing into either furniture, either product, either their own sale of, own line of products, or I don't know. A lot of firms are venturing into multiple disciplines because it is the need of the hour. So, what I would recommend is that if you can find a specialty for yourself that you're very good at and you can ace it, then nothing like it. It's better to, be extremely good at one thing than to be average in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dave. Awesome. I wanted to ask you something important. Maybe I'll ask you that in the quickfire round. So we'll jump to the quickfire round, and I'll ask
Okay.
you about those questions as well. So, which book has inspired you the most as an architect?
There are actually two books that have inspired me the most. Toward an Architecture by Le Corbusier, and apart from that, Writing About Architecture by Alexander Lange. For people who want to start a career, understand basically that what architecture criticism is, what architecture journalism is, and how to write about architecture, it's a great book to start with. It's got excerpts from all the great articles published all over the world, and she translates them for you step by step, word by word.
Nice.
So it's a great book to start. Apart from that, toward an architecture, of course, it's like the Bible. So you don't need to tell students to go through it. You must go through it.
Hmm. All right. What's on your playlist right now?
On my playlist, I listen to a lot of Bon Iver. I listen to a lot of folk and reggae music.
Oh, nice.
So
So you're like a Bob Marley fan.
yeah, sort of. I mean, all feel good music.
Nice. All right. I mean, you had sort of a great career. I mean, how would you take up architecture given the chance if you had gone back? or would you
Yeah,
choose something
definitely. I
else?
can't imagine myself doing something else because I don't have any clue about anything else. It's just the only thing that I know how to do. Apart from that, I have no clue about anything else.
All right. And as an architectural journalist and architect, do you get a chance to travel a lot? And have you been to many cities?
Yes, I've been to many cities. I've been to Ahmedabad, I've been to Nagpur, I've been to small and big places, but my favorite is Delhi. I
All right.
somehow I just love the city.
All
Something
right.
about it appeals me. You can never be bored in Delhi.
Yeah, except for the pollution, right?
Yeah, except for but there's something I don't know in general, the whole culture, the whole metro culture, the whole going to CP and chilling and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just very
Yeah,
appealing
I
to me.
think
I
you
feel
get
that
like a
you
nice
don't need.
vibe and yeah.
Yeah, you're just not bored over there. You don't need friends. You can just go around and even meet new people on the way and just
Yeah, and that way Indian cities are so dynamic and there's always
right.
something happening or it's
There's
like a
always
very,
something.
very cool experience, especially for outsiders who come to India.
Right.
Um, yeah, the most important question, how do you manage your time? You know, you have projects going on, you have the design collective. Uh, I don't know how you manage all of this together.
So I'm always packed. I'm always busy. I'm very happy that we have the lockdown right now. So there are a few things off my checklist, but then
Hmm.
usually I have projects to manage. I go and teach. I got lectures. Then I take workshops in other colleges too. I try to spread the word about architecture journalism. Try to
Hmm.
spread the word about publications, magazines. Try to give students an insight into what it's like working for a magazine. Apart from that, of course, I whatever time I got left, I spend the time reading, proofreading, whatever blogs we're going, and then of course coming up with new content, coming up with new stuff that you can put up on the magazine. So mostly I'm always packed.
Like, but what's the secret behind time management as a architectural
There's
journalist?
no secret. It's just that
And
I
how do you keep
enjoy
yourself
it. I
healthy?
like. I cannot be idle. I cannot be
Right.
when I spend my time doing something that is spend my leisure time actually doing something that is not related to this particular field. I feel that I'm wasting my time. So
Hmm.
I enjoy being busy most of the time. I enjoy that I have something to do. It's better than sitting idle.
All right. Talking about that, what does a daily routine in your life look like? Maybe pre-COVID, before all this happened.
So okay, so I get up, I'll work out, then I have things lined up for the day. So it'll be going to office, checking up on work, lining up work, going to site, going to college, teaching lectures, coming back again to office, following up on work, uh, giving more instructions, and then again going back. So a pretty average life in which I'm completely immersed in my work
Yeah, and
because
you're a pretty
that's how
young.
journalism is actually. What people don't understand that architecture journalism is like any other field of
Yeah,
any other stream of journalism. It requires complete commitment because it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. So you have to come up with something new. You have to come up with something that people are going to like. So our magazine, for example, never sleeps. We respond to each and every mail that comes to us, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether we can publish, whether we cannot publish. Whatever mail we get, we respond to all of them. So you can never sleep. Your work is always constantly happening.
yeah, and you're a young guy, right? So you're tapping all that energy, so that's great.
Right, right. That's the plan, right? That right now while you have it, you should make use of it.
Exactly. All
Right.
right. Awesome. So thanks, Dave, coming to the podcast. We had a great session and a great talk. What's the best way our listeners could get in touch in case they want to reach out to you?
Email, otherwise Instagram is the best way. Through a magazine. Magazine is always available for everybody. A lot of people ask us questions about, like in general questions about, I have a page, I want to set it up. Could you advise? I'm an architecture student. Could you tell me about my portfolio, what to put, what not to put? So we are always available through our email. I am always available through my email and through my Instagram. So just write in the mail.
All right, guys. So you'll find all the show notes and links in our episode website. It'll be out in about 2 weeks' time on the podcast, but it'll be out on YouTube. And we'll quickly jump to the informal section. Let me just share my screen. All right, Dave. So could you briefly, walk us through your magazine and the various ideas behind all these?
So
Yeah.
uh, right. So this was the first edition basically. So when I was starting out, I thought that okay, In order to get projects, the best way to go about it would be approaching my professors in college. So I approached my Habib sir is also my college director. So I approached him for a few of his projects. I approached a few professors in my college for their projects. So I got projects from there. Then of course we approached a lot of firms online. And our first edition had around I think 12 to 14 blogs about we only focused towards architecture and interior design projects and a few interviews. We had two interviews from, and one interesting story is about Christina Dam. She is basically a global powerhouse when it comes to design. Her firm actually branches into almost every field you can imagine when it comes to design. So we approached her through email, and she was very cool. She was very happy with our initiative. She was like, "Yeah, it's a great initiative, and I haven't really published anything in India as yet, so I'll be happy to." And she sent us a lot of pictures through her studio in Copenhagen in Denmark,
Nice.
and a lot of content. And she was happy to answer the interview. So our first edition basically had two interviews and a few popular firms actually few from Bombay, few from Delhi, and our first edition was I think launched in May 2019.
And this project is a local project, right, from India, which is there on the cover.
No, some of the on the cover. Though this is a project by Thought Parallels
Right, right.
Architecture. So they were again when I think we approached them. They had not been published on any major architecture platform as yet. So this project is called Lightness of Being. Again, a wonderful project available on our website. So this was on the cover. So this is what we're trying to do. Each edition, each edition, at the end of each edition, there's a cover that is launched that gives you an insight as to what is going to be in this edition, and we select like any other magazine, uh, an image that is going to be on the cover because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted our magazine to be different from other magazines, and we still wanted to have the feel of print because you never know what happens in the future. We
Yeah.
might go into print, might as well come up with an edition, and the best way to launch an edition is to come up with the cover. So this was our first edition.
Yeah, I love the use of fonts and how you guys creatively compose the whole image. So that's great. So this was another feature, right? Cover which you guys did.
Right. This was basically an artist's edition per se,
Right.
in which we had a lot of artists, and we also covered Aman Khanna, who runs Clayman in Delhi, who comes up with these unique objects. So this edition wanted to represent creativity, wanted to represent artists, and wanted to. We had a lot of. We had at least with every edition actually we grew. So I think this was the third edition. So in the first edition we had around 12 blogs. In the second we had around 20. In the third we got 25, 30. Now we have around 60, 70 already that we have for this edition. So with every edition we're growing. Every edition is different. Every edition will have a theme. Every edition will have a concept.
Yeah, no, and every edition is always an improvement from the previous edition, I guess.
Right, that's the whole point. That you, with every edition, you should keep on growing because this is a field that you cannot learn about it. I still am learning about every day. I come to know about new things. Every day I come to know about new things that you can do with your magazine. So you always are going to be learning, and then how times change, more technology, more apps, more things that are coming out. You can always use them. You can always make your magazine better.
Awesome.
So this was again a Johannesburg studios, in which they came up with this revolutionary cycling showroom. So again, we approached them and they shared their content with us. The video for this is again available on our website, in which so the press of a button and installing building automation controls, the cycles go up and down like in a sci-fi movie. So something of that sort. So in this edition again we had more features in which we came up with editor's pick. We came up with special features. This was the edition in which our special feature was launched, TDC specials, in which we curate a few projects, few features, few publications that stand out, and we publish them as a special feature on our magazine.
Nice. So this is more of interior. Is it like more of the projects are a mix of interiors and exteriors? Is more
No,
interiors?
when it comes to the projects that we publish anything when it comes to architecture, interior design. It could be architecture, interiors, it could be renovation, it could be unbuilt projects that you send for a competition entry that after sending you have no use of,
Yeah.
because a lot of projects you compile, you present, but then for some reason they fall short
Yeah.
and they're not really completed, not really executed. So you can always send us those projects. Apart from that, a lot of people are interested in writing about issues that matter to them. So you can always send us articles, you can always send us reports, that you can always send us synopsis. Like recently, for our last edition, the principal for Studio Lotus in Delhi sent us a synopsis about his review of hospitality spaces in India and what's happening in today's market. So we are always open to publishing all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is a special edition for this month, right?
Yeah, this is basically our lockdown edition, because we wanted to come up with an edition that serves as a caution basically. So yellow being the color of caution, which is usually used on all the hazard signs or the signages, because it's easily seen by everybody. We thought of yellow in this. For this edition, we had an interesting project, Hello Yellow by Humming Tree. So
Right.
we thought of using them on the cover, and our entire magazine is online, is now yellow with our logo also, yellow and black actually, because that is the theme of science. And we did an exclusive article which is on the cover, is analyzing the effects of coronavirus. It's on the homepage actually,
Okay. Okay.
that how offices in India are dealing with the pandemic and what measures have they taken. So I wanted our magazine to be the first to cover this, to talk to magazine architecture firms from all around India and understand what all measures they took, how they are dealing with work from home, what has happened to their ongoing projects, and after the pandemic, how they're going to deal with it, and whether productivity of their ongoing projects or productivity of their work in general has been affected and how it has been affected. We also approached Studio AVT, which is again um, in Delhi, who does a lot of projects in the healthcare sector. So we asked them as to what is the role of designers and how our buildings can adapt better in the case of a crisis like this. What measures can be taken? So they in the article they mentioned a very innovative sort of a way in which a movable sort of a quarantine setup, where it can be designed in a manner that it can be easily moved around basically.
Right.
So our attempt was to understand the pandemic, understand how firms are dealing with it, and understand the repercussions of it going forward, basically.
Nice. Yeah, and that you've also written a piece on the Swachh Bharat, Swachh Indore, right?
Right, Swachhanda. So Indore is basically, it was declared defecation free. It's the cleanest city in India. At least it was before the lockdown. But one day when I think I was driving around with my mother. She uh, got down to use the washroom at one of the public washroom. When she came back, she was very unhappy with it, that the way the washroom was, and the door didn't even have a latch and stuff like that. So that's when I thought that it's an interesting thing to write about, that how the cleanest city in India doesn't really have good services when it comes to women, because when this whole Swachh Abhiyan was happening,
Yeah.
the government and municipal corporation were building all sorts of toilets everywhere, but they would always place the female toilet next to the male toilet,
Yeah.
because that's generally the. So I have always noticed that females don't generally like using it. I have also posted a picture in which you see a male and a female toilet right on the center of a square, with around 5 to 10, males standing in front of it. So I can't think of any female who would find it comfortable going inside. Also, one of the articles I read about Times of India, which I mentioned in the article, they covered how during a procession or something, a local constable appealed to the DSP to provide better facilities when it comes to women toilets in police stations, because the women's toilets were so poor that
Yeah.
whenever they have to go and use it, usually all women toilets when it comes to police stations, there's only one female toilet, and it's always placed next to the male toilet, and the door doesn't even have sort of a latch to it, and out of that 50% has only one common toilet, which is common for male and female, so
Hmm.
they have to announce before going in basically. So I tried to cover that, and I also covered how in Bombay, I think it was IRC, Rohan Chavan architects, who came up with the idea of an exclusive
Yeah, I think we can
female
show that.
toilet, separate. So at the end of the article, I suggested that that's what the government authorities should do. They should come up with
Yeah, the light box, right?
the light box, right?
Yeah, it's a great project. It shows that even toilets is just you can use it for multiple other functions as well, like meeting and
Exactly.
eating
And
as
the
well.
materials that he used and the concept that he even came up with the interaction place in the center
Yeah,
where people can sit and talk, and females using it. It has a charging point and stuff like that. So it was a great initiative. It was commissioned by the government.
hmm.
So I thought that the cleanest city of India should be doing something like this.
Yeah, and it's worked around a tree, so that's also pretty cool.
Right.
All right, great. All right, great, Dave. So that was very informative. Thanks for that. And yeah, so thanks for coming to the podcast. I hope to have you in the future as well. And hopefully it'll be more smooth in the future where you have like a proper show and can get into slides and do stuff.
Right. Hopefully. But anyway, thank you for having me on the show. It was a great experience of talking to you and talking about all these things. I'm always looking to spread the word about what we're trying to do and how a publication functions, because even though we have a considerable readership today, but people still don't understand how we function, how our monthly editions function, how to contact us, how do we publish their work. So I'm always looking for opportunities like this to speak about the importance of architects journalism and how we form the magazine and trying to promote the idea of it everywhere. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot and see you on the other side. Cheers, Dave.